Hi, I'm Mr. C, the teacher, and this is my classroom. Over the years, I've created hundreds of lessons in every subject area. So grab your tools for school and join in with us. Or sit back and just watch. And let's go on a learning journey together. Because you're watching Lessons from the Classroom. Well, let's take a look at what the topic for today's episode is going to be about. You know, I love being surrounded by great books, because one of my favorite things to do is to read stories. So let's make some time right now and read a storybook. This is story time. Franklin's Halloween by Paulette Bourgeois, and illustrated by Brenda Clark, and read by Mr. C, the teacher. Franklin could count by twos and tie his shoes. He knew the days of the week, the months of the year, and the holidays in every season. Today was October 31st. It was Halloween. Franklin could hardly wait for tonight's costume party. Everyone would be there. Franklin and his friends had talked about the party for weeks. There would be games, prizes, and even a parade. Best of all, there would be a haunted house. "I think there'll be bats and spiders," said Franklin. "And skeletons," added Beaver. Rabbit shivered. "My sister says she saw a real ghost in there last year." "That's silly, Rabbit," said Beaver. "There are no real ghosts." All of Franklin's friends were excited because of the costume contest. Franklin wasn't sure what he was going to wear. He'd tried on everything in his dress-up trunk, but nothing seemed quite right. Beaver and Goose were keeping their costumes secret. "Try to find us at the party," they giggled. Fox was also mysterious about what he was going to be. "Look for something gruesome," he said. And that gave Franklin an idea. He would be something creepy. It took Franklin more than an hour to make his costume. As soon as it was done, he sneaked up behind his father and tapped him on the shoulder. "Trick or treat," said Franklin. "Ah!" gasped his father. "Who are you?" In his deepest, spookiest voice, Franklin answered, "It's me, Frankenstein." On the way to town, Franklin tried to guess who was inside each costume. "At least I don't have to worry about finding Bear," said Franklin. "He's always a ghost." By the time Franklin and his parents arrived, the party had started. Franklin spotted a ghost at the apple bobbing and hurried towards him. "Hello, Bear," Franklin said. "Ooh," answered the ghost. "That's good, Bear," said Franklin. "You sound really scary." Franklin bobbed for an apple. Then he ran to the pumpkin toss. It was his favorite game because he always won a treat. Franklin's bag was almost full by the time the judges announced the costume contest. While everyone lined up for the parade, Franklin tried to find more of his friends. He thought he recognized Beaver and Goose, but where was Fox? They marched around the building twice. Franklin made horrible monster sounds and shuffled with stiff, straight legs. He won a prize for being the best green monster. There was only one more thing to do. Go into the haunted house. "You first," said Beaver, pushing Franklin towards the door. It creaked open. A skeleton rattled. Chains clanged. There were moans. Franklin stepped on something crunchy. Suddenly, a big, hairy hand reached out in the darkness. Franklin's heart beat hard and fast, but before he could scream, a light was flicked on. "Trick or treat!" shouted Mr. Mole. Franklin looked around nervously, and then he laughed. The hairy hand was only Mr. Mole's mop. "Here's a treat for braving the haunted house," said Mr. Mole. "A ghost came before you. He got so scared he flew away." "But Bear can't fly," said Franklin. "Oh, it wasn't Bear," explained Mr. Mole. "Bear is homesick with a nasty cold." Franklin shuddered. If Bear wasn't the ghost, then who was? He ran back to his friends who were waiting in line for the haunted house. "Was it that scary?" asked Fox. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I did," said Franklin. He told them what Mr. Mole had said. "You mean that Bear was never here?" asked Beaver. Franklin shook his head. "The ghost flew over them. It swooped low and called, 'Whoo!'" Rabbit twitched. "So what is white, says 'who,' and flies?" "A real ghost," answered Goose. "Run!" Franklin was about to follow when he saw a feather floating down. "Stop!" he shouted. "I think I know who the ghost is." Franklin showed them the feather. "Look, it must be Mr. Owl." Even Rabbit giggled when he realized the trick their teacher had played. By the end of the party, everyone's bag was full. "Poor Bear," said Raccoon. "No treats for him." "We could share our treats with Bear," suggested Franklin. All the friends agreed. They each put some treats into a bag. Then they walked to Bear's house and left the bag on the doorstep. "Trick and treat," they called. On the way home, Franklin looked into his treat bag. "Goodness," said his mother, "you have enough there to last until next Halloween." "Maybe," said Franklin, sampling a few, but secretly he hoped the treats would last until the end of the week. Welcome to Cooking with Vlad, the show where recipes are sent in, and you can make them from the comfort of your own hovel. Today's recipe was sent in by one Miss Gertrude Grindelwich from Salem. My dear mom, she was a Hungarian bot, you know. She would say to me, Vlad, cooking is a science. You must follow the recipe exactly to get it right. So today, grab some paper and a pencil or quill and ink and parchment paper, whatever you fancy, and follow along with our recipe. Now, the very first ingredient you want to add is going to be the teeth of a vampire. Add that into the portion. Take some time at home now to copy down the recipe. The first ingredient, teeth of a vampire.
The teeth of a vampire.
The second ingredient is the fingers of a witch. Yes, no, Mrs. Grindelwich, she did not specify how many, so we just throw in a bunch of them. There we go. Take some time to copy down that ingredient, the fingers of a witch.
The fingers of a witch.
The next ingredient is the ears. Yes, the ears of a monster. The ears of a monster. Here you go. Copy down that ingredient. Ears of a monster.
The ears of a monster.
Oh, you're back with us. I was noticing my other ears of a monster. They smell a little off. I think we throw them in there as well. I had to get them out of the kitchen. The very next ingredient in the recipe will be the wings of a bat. Oh, yeah. Take that one. Yeah, that wing of a bat right there. Okay, take the time to, with your pencil and paper or parchment and ink, to write down that on next recipe, the wings of a bat. It doesn't matter too much a Hungarian bat or whatever you've got handy.
The wings of a bat.
Alright, the very next ingredient is going to be the tail of the mouse. Make sure it's just the whole mouse is fallen, but that's okay. The tail is still on there. Take some time to write down that next ingredient. The tail of a mouse needs to go in, yes.
The tail of a mouse.
Oh, the next ingredient, one of my favorites, is the eyes of a mummy. You know, the eyes. Make sure you have some fresh ingredients. The eyes of a mummy, yes, and drop those in. Sometimes you can buy the eyes of a mummy in bulk form. I like the bulk forms as well. Yeah, throw some eyes of a mummy in there. Take some time now to copy down that ingredient into your recipe. The eyes of a mummy. The big one might have been from a daddy.
The eyes of a mummy.
Ah, yes, now, our last ingredient, the legs of a spider. The legs of a spider. You don't have to freak out about it. Legs of a spider. Just put those spiders. They're all legs anyways, right? Now, copy down that next ingredient, the legs of a spider. Write that down. Good.
The legs of a spider.
Yes, let's give that portion a good stirring up. Let's mix that up very well. Yes, that should be good. Now take an empty vial. You want to dip it in and pick up some of the portion in it. There we go. Now this portion, if we've made it correctly following the ingredients, this portion shall be an elixir of youth, of making me young again and strong and powerful. Yes. Think it down now. Oh, I think I can feel it working already.
Oh no, that didn't work.
All right, well, it looks like I've got plenty of art supplies and tools on hand, so I guess it's time to do some quick art creations. We're going to do a draw and tell story, so I need some tools like a pencil and an eraser. And as I tell the story, I want you to draw along with me, copying what I draw. Each part of the story has a drawing that goes with it. This story is called Cousin Vladimir. This is the story of a bat named Spooky. I'm going to draw our bat Spooky right here. Let's give him a set of wings. There we go. There's the bat, Spooky. Spooky lived far, far away amongst the Carpathian Mountains. Let's draw those Carpathian Mountains. They're big, tall, steep mountains with big, tall, pointed peaks on them. There's our Carpathian Mountains. Spooky was flapping about in the Carpathian Mountains one night when he happened to flap past his mailbox. He noticed that there was a letter there for him, and he flapped down excitedly to see who it was from, because Spooky very rarely got letters from anyone. As soon as he saw the postmark, Duncan, British Columbia, Canada, Spooky knew that the letter was from his cousin, Vladimir. Vladimir was the only person that Spooky knew in Canada. Cousin Spooky, the letter read, "We are having a family reunion this year here in Duncan. Please come." And it was signed, "Your cousin Vlad." Well, Spooky packed his bag then and there. He put in dried worm tongues, pickled rhino horns, and marinated frog eyes. Party food that he'd been saving for just such an occasion. Let's draw Spooky's bag here that he's put all those delightful things in. There's the bag that he can carry. Inside he's got his marinated frog eyes and pickled rhino horns and dried worm tongues. I didn't even know worms had tongues. Then Spooky started off, flapping, 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 through the dark Carpathian night. By dawn he was exhausted, and seeing a man walking on the road below, he swooped down and he asked him, "Am I in Duncan, British Columbia, Canada yet?" "No, laughed the man, but you are almost in Budapest. If you want to get to Canada, you had better take an airplane. It is a long way to fly. So Spooky walked to the airport in Budapest. He sent a telegram to his cousin, and he bought a ticket. In that airplane, off he flew, over the mountains, over the sea, and finally he landed in the town of Duncan on Vancouver Island. So right here I'm going to draw the airport that Spooky walked to, and then Spooky gets on a plane, and the plane flies over top of the mountains, and it lands back down here. And right here, this is the town of Duncan on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Canada. That's where we live. There we go, the flight path from airport to airport. You have to use your imagination a little bit. When he got off the plane, the airport was deserted. Spooky had expected Vladimir to be there to meet him, but there wasn't a soul around. He waited, and he waited. Spooky had just decided to take the very next plane back to the Carpathian Mountains when the clock began to strike midnight. Bong, bong, bong. A strange little gnomish sort of man scuttled through the door and beckoned to Spooky to follow him. Outside on the driveway there was a huge black coach pulled by 7 spectral horses. The gnome opened the door. Spooky climbed up onto the velvet seat, and the door closed. A moment later, he could feel the coach moving swiftly down a long hill, and then all of a sudden, they were going up again, rumbling and bumbling over a rough track. So here he is getting inside the car, and they go down here with the coach, and then all of a sudden, they go up a hill. So we're going down and then up. The door opened, and the gnome motioned for Spooky to get down. Then, without a word, he jumped up onto his seat and whipped up the horses. In a moment, they had disappeared back down the road by which they had come. Spooky could see that the road dropped away into a canyon full of jagged pinnacle rocks. Let's draw those jagged pinnacle rocks. Those jagged rocks in this canyon. Gathering all his strength and clutching his bag in his claws, he flew wearily across the canyon and landed on the other side. So here is Spooky on top here, and he's going to fly over top of that canyon of jagged rocks and land here on the other side. He walked along a rough path through the forest, and he sat down to rest. His head began to nod, and he was almost asleep when he heard a noise behind him. He turned to see a witch sitting there, grinning her snaggle-toothed grin. "Come for a ride, dearie," she cackled. "Climb onto my broom, and I will take you where you need to go." What could Spooky do? He climbed onto the broom behind the witch, and then, zoom! They soared off to the west. So let's add a little bit more to our drawing. Here's Spooky walking down the trail, and he walks way over here, and over here he meets the witch, and they get on the broom, and zoom! Off they go in that direction. So we have a little bit of trail to draw in. Again, use your imagination. And then on the broom, zoom, flying off that way. They soared to the west and turned and swooped back toward the east so fast that Spooky had to clutch onto the broomstick with all of his strength to keep from being swept off by the wind. And then they stopped. So here they are, they fly this way, and then zoom! They fly way over here. And then they stop. "End of the line, dearie," said the witch. "There's the place you're looking for. Go carefully." Spooky started across the field to the hulking dark shape that the witch had shown him. Let's draw the pathway that Spooky takes. He walks back this way. So we got the broom flight, and then Spooky walking towards some shape in the darkness. Up closer, he saw that it was a massive, rambling house. All the windows were dark. Several were broken. Shutters hung crooked on their hinges. The garden was totally overgrown with weeds. Spooky walked up to the creaking stairs, and he lifted the heavy knocker. The boom, boom, boom noise echoed through the house. A light came on in one of the tower rooms. There was the sound of footsteps. The door creaked open. A tall man, dressed all in black, stood there. He held one arm draped in a black cape across in front of him, hiding all of his face but his eyes. Those eyes stared at the little bat, making a shiver run down his wings. And then all the lights came on. The gnome and the witch called out, "Surprise!" And the vampire swept aside his cape and laughed. "Welcome to Duncan on Vancouver Island, Cousin Spooky. You are just in time for the party." What we have to add to our drawing just to finish it off is we're going to add wings like this. These are his wings that were shivering with fright. And we want to add the eyes that we can see when the tall man who answers the door is right there. I think we'll just also add a little line across here too, just to finish that part off. And there we go. There's the character that we've created from this story. As we drew along each part of the story, we ended up with, what's our picture of? If you said, a vampire, you are correct. That's the story of Cousin of Vladimir, Mrs. Vladimir, a vampire. Okay, the only thing our picture could use is probably some color. So I've got my pencil crayons here. Let's add a little bit of color here. You can join me by grabbing your crayons. I've colored in my vampire. They're usually fairly pale-skinned, dark hair, dark eyebrows, gleaming red eyes, a little bit of blood on his fangs, his black cape. Gave him a little bit of a red sort of bow tie part to his cape. There's our cousin, Vladimir. Questionable letters! Well, thanks for joining me, and I hope you learned something new and had fun doing the lessons. Join me next time on another episode of Lessons from the Classroom.